and welcome to today's podcast on media organizations and professionals. If you're studying for your upcoming exam, you're in the right place. In this episode, we'll be diving into Chapter 5, focusing on how media organizations operate, respond to constraints, and influence the flow of information. Let's get started. Explanation of the structure. First, let's talk about the structure in media organizations. This refers to economic and political frameworks that shape the media industry. These structures guide decision-making, dictate the goals of media organizations, and set the terrain for how media professionals create content and navigate challenges. On the other hand, we have agency, which refers to the ability of media professionals like journalists and producers to make decisions within these structures. They do this by anticipating political and economic constraints, while also considering the preference of their audiences. The balance between structure and agency is crucial in understanding how media works. Second section, political constraints. Compliance, one way media professionals respond to political constraints, is through compliance. This means following regulations to avoid conflicts with regulators. It's a safe strategy, but can limit freedom. Preemption. Another strategy is preemption, where media organizations anticipate regulations before they are imposed. For example, they might propose self-regulation, such as age warning, on content, which gives them more control over their operations. Interpretation. Some regulations are ambiguous, and media professionals can interpret them in ways that fit their needs. This flexibility allows for creative responses to regulatory pressure. Ignore regulations. Sometimes organizations may simply ignore regulations. This can lead to legal challenges or fines, but it might also give media organizations more freedom in their content creation. Lastly, challenge. The most proactive response is to challenge the regulations. Big companies often have to resort to lobby for more favorable rules, influencing the political landscape in their favor. Third part, economic challenges in the media industry. High production costs. One major economic challenge media organizations face is the high cost of production. For instance, producing movies or large-scale TV shows involves huge financial investments, which can be risky. The second major challenge is the unpredictability of audience tastes. With so many options available to consumers, it is hard to predict what will succeed. This is why many projects flop, even if they seem high quality. To mitigate these risks, media organizations often replicate successful formats. Think of talent shows or similar reality TV formats. These are proven winners that help offset the losses from failed projects. There is a catch. Audiences eventually demand more innovation and diversity. Another strategy is to use celebrities. Stars draw attention, and their involvement increases the chance of project becoming a hit. Celebrities serve as their physical embodiment of success, making media production more marketable. The hit system and convergence culture. Now let's talk about the hit system in media. Most major media companies rely on few hits to make up for the losses from flopped projects. Media executives, not the audiences, make the initial decision about what will succeed. Convergence culture by Henry Jenkins. Convergence culture, a concept introduced by Henry Jenkins, refers to the flow of content across multiple media platforms. This approach allows media organizations to create expansive fictional universes that can be marketed and sold across various channels. Conventions are widely accepted practices within media industries. Like specific genres or writing styles, these conventions help standardize the way media content is created, making it easier to market and manage. Routines refer to standardized procedures used by media professionals to streamline production. These routines help save time and ensure that deadlines are met. Over the time, contingents emerge from these routines and become ingrained in industry practices. But why do conventions exist? Conventions exist for a few reasons: to market products effectively, to save time and ensure efficiency, and because certain conventions have been proven to be commercially successful. Once again, conventions are widely accepted practices within media industries like specific genres or writing styles. Learning conventions. Professional roles. We learn these conventions by adopting specific professional roles such as journalists, producers, and editors. Each role comes with expectations about how media professionals should act. Throughout socialization, whether through formal education, training, or on-the-job experience, individuals internalize these conventions. The values, beliefs, and norms of media industries become a part of their professional identity. Roles in journalism. Journalists play various roles depending on the context. Some are informative disseminators, focusing on quickly sharing accurate information with the public. Others are interpreters, digging deeper into complex issues, while adversarial journalists challenge the status quo, exposing corruption or wrongdoing. Gatekeeping. Gatekeeping is the process by which journalists decide which stories become news. Not all events make it through the gates of journalism. Factors like news nets, beats, and rounds help journalists decide what to cover, but newsworthiness is socially constructed and shaped by audience expectations. More on the news nets in a second. Newsnet is Churchman's metaphor explaining the standard practice for gathering news, and beat the subject matter of geographical area that a reporter might be assigned to cover. Rounds a reporter's scheduled visit to key locations or sources like to provide news. Selection of news. Due to the constraints of time and resources, news organizations pre-select the types of stories they will cover. This often leads to a focus on elites and official sources while excluding a wider range of voices. Today's media organizations must generate a constant stream of content, often under tight deadlines. This pressure can lead to homogenization, where news stories across outlets start to look the same. The need for speed in news reporting also compresses decision-making, affecting the accuracy and depth of coverage. In some cases, the pursuit of speed can compromise journalistic integrity. Objectivity. Objectivity is a cornerstone of traditional journalism. It's the belief in separating facts from values, ensuring balanced and impartial reporting. However, this objective reporting often reflects the perspective of those in power rather than offering a full range of viewpoints. Challenges with objectivity. By adhering strictly to objectivity, journalism may fail to provide a comprehensive view of events, and in some cases it can reinforce the dominance of powerful elites. So to recap, we've covered a wide range of important concepts in media organizations, from how they respond to political and economic constraints to routines and conversations that shape the new production. Let's start with Chapter 6. Welcome to Media Minds, the show where we decode complex concepts to help you ace your studies and deepen your understanding. Today's theme is Chapter 6 to 8, Media and Ideology. Let's begin with the basics. What is ideology? Simply put, it's a system of ideas, beliefs, and values that shapes how we see the world and our place in it. It influences not only our worldview, but also the norms and values we internalize through a process called socialization. For instance, think about political ideologies like democracy or socialism. These explain how the government should function and distribute power. Or cultural ideologies, ideas about gender roles, traditions, or religion that shape our daily lives and interactions. Here's the thing. Ideologies often feel natural due to us, like wearing invisible glasses that filter the world in a certain way. We don't even realize they're there. But here's a catch. Ideologies can distort reality. Marxist thinkers, for example, argue that ideology often justifies power structures by painting an inaccurate picture of the world. This distortion can prevent us from recognizing inequality or exploitation. Now, how does all this connect to media? Media doesn't just reflect reality, it shapes it, creating and reinforcing ideologies. Let's break it down into key concepts. Dominant ideology. Media often reinforce dominant world views and social norms. For example, repeated portrayals of traditional families in television shows can make this seem like a standard of the ideal way of life. Normalization. Media sets boundaries on what ideas or behaviors are acceptable. What we see in movies, news, or advertisements can make certain ideas seem normal, while excluding or marginalizing others. Cultural contradictions. Sometimes media reflects competing ideologies, sparking debates about morality and values. For instance, think about controversies over depiction of LGBTQ+ characters or immigration in films and TV. Profit versus ideology. Producers might prioritize what's popular and profitable over representing diverse or challenging viewpoints. That's why mainstream media often avoids polarizing issues that could alienate audiences. To really understand media's ideological role, let's talk about three big thinkers: Marx, Gramsci, and Stuart Hall. Karl Marx. Marx saw ideology as a tool of domination. He argued that those in power, like wealthy business owners, use ideology to justify their control. For example, the idea that hard work always leads to success can distract people from questioning systematic inequality. Antonio Gramsci expanded Marx's ideas with the concept of hegemony, the dominance of one group's ideology through cultural leadership rather than force. Media, schools, and religion spread these ideas, making them seem natural. But hegemony isn't unchallenged. Gramsci argued that marginalized groups can resist dominant ideologies, creating alternative narratives. Think of movements like feminism or climate activism as examples of this struggle. Stuart Hall. Hall introduces the encoding and decoding model. Media producers encode messages with intended meaning, but audiences decode these messages differently based on their social and cultural background. For example, preferred reading, the audience agrees with the message. Negotiated reading, they partially agree but contest some aspects. And oppositional reading, they reject the intended meaning altogether. This flexibility shows how active audiences are interpreting media. Let's turn to how media representation intersects with social inequality. Stereotypes in media. Media often portrays groups based on stereotypes. For example, movies might depict women as caregivers or minorities as villains. Intersectionality. The concept shows how overlapping identities like race, gender, and class create unique experiences of privilege or oppression. Digital media challenges. Social media has democratized content creation, but it's not perfect. Algorithms can create echo chambers, where users only use content that reinforces their views, deepening polarization. Denotation, the identification of something by pointing it out. Connotation refers to overtones, additional meanings, and implications associated with a word or a noun. False consciousness, aspects of a social world that serve the interests of the few while wrongly considered as serving the interests of the many. Polarization, the splitting of society into two distinct groups that are different ends of a spectrum. Before we wrap, let's talk about advertising. It's one of the clearest examples of media shaping ideology. Consumer culture, advertising promotes individualism and consumerism from early 20th century, ads pointed consumption as a way to integrate society or resolve conflicts. Then use momism. Ads idealize motherhood with unattainable standards, subtly reinforcing control over women by linking identity to caregiving. Culture jamming. On the flip side, tactics like pranking or subverting ads critique consumer culture. For example, altering a billboard to highlight a manipulative nature is a way to jam the system. Let's go over the chapter 8 a bit more. And the big idea here is simple but revolutionary. Audiences are active, not passive. In the early days of media research, people were thought to be easily influenced by what they consumed, almost like sponges, soaking up whatever the media gave them. But over the time, researchers began to realize that audiences interpret responses to and even create media in ways that challenges this assumption. Let's start by looking at how audiences can actively engage with media in four distinct ways. Interpretation. Every person brings their own experiences, perspective, and emotion to media. For example, think about a popular TV show or movie. Two people watching the same thing might take away completely different messages. One might see it's a fun story, while another might notice deeper themes about society, relationships, or politics. Individual interpretation is key to understanding how active audiences are. 2. Social contact or interpretation. Media isn't just something we consume alone, it's shared experience. Have you ever talked about a movie with a friends or debated the meaning of a song on social media? This is what we call the social context of interpretation. People share their interpretations and in doing so influence each other. Researchers describe this as forming interpretive communities where our shared backgrounds or cultural context shape how we understand media. 3. Collective action. Sometimes audiences take things a step further. They demand change. Think about fan campaigns to bring back cancelled TV shows or movements calling out problematic content. This kind of collective action shows how audiences can organize and make their voice heard by media producers. 4. Audiences as media producers. In today's digital world, the line between consumers and producers is blurry. Thanks to platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, ordinary people can create their own content. This phenomenon is part of what Henry Jenkins calls participatory culture, where creativity and collaboration thrive. However, it's important to note participation inequality. While some people actively create content, many remain passive lurkers who simply consume without contributing. Section 3. Audiences' roles in digital media. Let's break this down. In this digital age, audiences play various roles. You might see yourself in one or even more of these categories. First, conversationalists, sharing opinion and engaging in dialogue. 2. Critics, writing reviews, posting comments, and creating content. Collectors, creating and organizing content. Joiners, actively maintaining social media profiles. 5. Spectators, quietly consuming content. 6. Inactive users, completely disengaged. Even though audiences are more active than ever, there are challenges. The digital divide. Not everyone has equal access to the internet. Factors like income, education, and location can limit participation. New gatekeepers. Traditional gatekeepers like editors used to control what content was published. Today, algorithms and even ordinary users play a role in deciding what gets attention. However, this shift can lead to choice fatigue, as people feel overwhelmed by endless options. Now, let's explore two major approaches to understanding audiences. 1. Uses and gratifications approach. This theory focuses on why people use media and what they do with it. Strengths. It respects audiences as rational and active in their choice. Weaknesses. It doesn't study media effects, focusing only on motivations, which can be hard to measure. The theory of uses and gratifications approach. 2. Critical cultural studies. This approach emphasizes how people interpret media within their social context. One key concept here is Stuart Hall encoding-decoding model. Media producers encode content with intended meanings. Audiences decode these meanings in three ways: preferred reading, accepting the intended meaning, negotiated reading, partially agreeing but challenging some aspects, and oppositional reading, rejecting the intended meaning altogether. Another important idea is polysemy, the notion that media texts can have multiple interpretations, making them accessible to diverse audiences. Here are a few more ideas that tie everything together. Reception theory. While audiences are active, their interpretation are shaped by cultural codes and social contexts. Second screen phenomenon. Watching TV while engaging online ads, news, layers of interaction. Culture jamming. Creative tactics used to subvert or critique consumer culture, like reworking ads to challenge their original messages. Conclusion. To sum up, audiences are far more than passive consumers. They interpret, discuss, challenge, and even create media, shaping its meaning in dynamic ways. This chapter highlights how media studies have evolved to respect the intellect and agency of audiences, recognizing their central role in the media landscape. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow students. And see you in the next class.